His lecture today is entitled A Political History of Saudi Arabia. Please join me in extending a warm USF welcome to His Royal Highness Prince Turki.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أفضل المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Provost Wilcox, Alberto de Alejo, friends, thank you for receiving me today to speak to you. Indeed, with such a reception, makes me think that I might move here. Today, I wish to record a bit of a history in the shape of sharing with you the political realities of my home country and one of America's closest allies, Saudi Arabia. As we all know, since September 11, 2001, the kingdom has been the target of unwarranted prejudices against it in the Western press. What you hear in my talk will help you see these prejudices for what all prejudices are: strong opinions based on baseless information. In 1924, ladies and gentlemen, following hundreds of years of intertribal division and warfare, the late King Abdulaziz united what was then the Kingdom of the Hijaz and the Sultanate of Najd and its dependencies into what in 1932 would become the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Following this unification, he called for the first Islamic conference ever to be held since the dissolution of the Ottoman Caliphate in 1922. In the inaugural speech at that conference, delivered in 1926, he stressed the need for Muslims everywhere to overcome their sectarian and political differences. Further, at a time when there were only 3 truly independent Muslim nations, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen, he advised those who came from the mostly still colonized Muslim lands not to provoke and denigrate the non-Muslims in their midst, but to concentrate on sharing and learning from their skills and know-how in order to help each other. He also stressed that his newly united realm was in serious need of the expertise of other Muslims, regardless of their race or sect. And thus, his first act upon entering the Holy Mosque in Mecca as a pilgrim was to appoint an Egyptian Muslim Shafi'i scholar as Imam of the mosque. However, King Abdulaziz was soon to find that not everyone shared or valued his openness to others. As he quickly began fostering relations between the kingdom and the international community, he soon faced the emerging bigotry of some of his closest allies among the Bedouin chiefs who had worked with him for unification. In short, they had developed political ambitions that they tried to veil by a religious context, accusing the king of consorting with infidels and introducing non-Muslim practices and tools such as the radio and the automobile. After recurrent insurrections, the king called for a public debate between himself and the unruly Bedouin leaders. At this debate, the people and the religious scholars served as judges. When the more than 1,800 citizens at the debate favored the king's arguments, his opponents declared open rebellion. Fortunately, the king's military skill and popular appeal overcame them, and he was able to carry on with his vision of creating the Saudi Arabia that exists today, a thriving and open modern country that contributes significantly to the welfare of humanity. In the years following unification, up to the end of the Second World War, the kingdom's development proceeded, uninterrupted by internal strife like that described above, or external threats posed by a variety of inimical neighbors. Even before the war, that is the Second World War, the Palestinian problem had emerged, and it continues to bedevil the stability and security of Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, and beyond. In response to this problem, the kingdom began to assert what remains its central position today, that the rights of the Palestinians have been abrogated and they must be restored fully. These rights include the right of self-determination, the right to a sovereign state with its capital in East Jerusalem, and the right of their own identity. The kingdom took these positions not only out of a sense of inherent justice, but in an attempt to placate and give expression to the widespread anger at the plight of the Palestinians that continues to burst forth from its own population as well as others. By the mid-60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, the kingdom faced several challenges. First, there were the ambitions of the late Jamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt and the Arab nationalist socialist movement, which sought to overthrow the Saudi government and establish a like-minded republic in the Arabian Peninsula. Then Britain's withdrawal from east of Suez in 1971 led to scrambling among international actors in the area for political gain and ideological ascendancy. And while the US was already an ally of the kingdom, the then mighty Soviet Union also promoted its ambitions through arms sales to Arab socialist countries and the nascent communist regime in South Yemen. The kingdom found itself caught in the middle of the Cold War and had to take many measures due to the Soviet presence to assure that our friendship with the United States was clear and strong. The late King Faisal, who had succeeded King Saud in 1964 and ruled until 1975, met these challenges with a skillful internal policy of political reform and external alliances with like-minded Arab countries and the United States. His 10-point program for reform, which he published in 1962 when he was still viceroy to the late King Saud, included the widening of women's education, the establishment of a Ministry of Justice and a Ministry of Labor, and other equally pertinent acts. In 1965, he inaugurated a dialogue with the late Pope Paul VI, which culminated in a visit by the late Minister of Justice, Sheikh Mohammed al-Habkan, to the Vatican, and the return visit of the late Cardinal Pignatelli to the kingdom. In that year, the king issued his call for Islamic solidarity, culminating in the establishment of the Organization of the Islamic Conference, which is today the second largest international body to the United Nations, composed of 57 permanent member countries and 5 associate members, including the Russian Federation. It was an exciting time of development, openness, and advancement for the kingdom. But as the 1970s progressed and the importance of oil to the global economy increased, bigger changes started to occur. Due to Saudi Arabia's leadership among Arab nations, its role as the custodian of the 2 holiest mosques of Islam, and its possession of over 25% of the world's oil resources, the kingdom was quickly becoming the premier global player in energy affairs, and one of the most prominent countries in the Arab world and the de facto leader of the Muslim world. It was thus that under the guardianship of both the late King Khalid, who succeeded King Faisal in 1975, and the late King Fahd, who succeeded King Khalid in 1982, and today, under the leadership of King Abdullah, that the kingdom has prospered. But this prosperity did not come without its challenges. In November 1979, an attack on the Holy Mosque in Mecca by deviant religious zealots showed that political ambition in the guise of religious zeal was still as dangerous as it had been under the late King Abdulaziz, and was already becoming capable of the brazen atrocities it would later carry out in cities around the world. Fortunately, after 2 long weeks of armed conflict between the Saudi military and the insurgents, which resulted in hundreds of deaths, the mosque was finally cleared and the perpetrators brought to justice. It was an early indication of the long battle my country and other countries would face, and still face, against deviants who use religion as a means of achieving opportunistic political aims. In that same year, the revolution in Iran and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan getting the upper hand. The zeal with which Iran's Khomeini tried to export his revolution meant that there were inevitable differences between himself and the kingdom. These differences led to clashes between Iranian pilgrims and Saudi security forces during the Muslim pilgrimage to Mecca, which led in the mid-80s to a break in diplomatic relations with Iran. Relations not restored until 1995. The Iran-Iraq War, which began in September 1980 and did not end until 1988, also exacerbated relations between the kingdom and Iran, especially after 1982, when Iranian forces pushed out the Iraqis and declared their intention to occupy Iraq. In 1985, the Iranians sent 2 aircraft to bomb Saudi oil facilities at Ras al-Nur, but were fortunately shot down by the Saudi Air Force. So as we can see, while Iraq and Iran have been very much in the news in the United States over the last 20 years, Saudi Arabia has been facing these problems for even longer. In Afghanistan, the kingdom cooperated with Pakistan and the United States to help Pakistan in preventing the Soviet Union from marching into Islamabad by providing the Afghan Mujahideen with military supplies, training, and intelligence. However, the kingdom never supplied any men to the Mujahideen because they said that they did not need them. The kingdom was concerned that the Soviet Union might find evidence of Saudi interference in Afghanistan to use it as a pretext to attack Pakistan. Fortunately, this did not occur.